We have a birthday to celebrate.
It was a month ago. Oh, the Dreamcast!
Yay! What are you referencing?
I'm joking.
The Sega Dreamcast just turned 15 years old on September 9th, 1999. It seems like it was just yesterday. That's cliche, but I remember, going over my roommate's house during summer, and actually it was during the break, I guess. It was during the break, I guess. That'd be like going back in October break, and playing the game, playing the Dreamcast on like the downstairs in the basement on a little like 14-inch TV, and playing Soul Calibur, and being amazed that now we are finally at the place where a console is exactly like the arcade.
I have some fun stories about the Dreamcast. Oh, get this, people who think I hate everything. I love the fucking Dreamcast.
They won't watch that video. They'll comment on the next one.
Yeah, they'll come on the next one, where I slip up on something and then they'll nail me to a fucking cross. So, anyways, I love the Dreamcast. It is one of the, if not the only system that I bought on launch day.
Oh, really?
And it was funny because I had actually got my wisdom teeth pulled that day. So my mom went and picked up the Dreamcast for me. It was my senior year of high school, 1999. And she got me Sonic the Hedgehog because I'd pre-ordered that as well.
Sonic Adventure?
Sonic Adventure.
That was a launch title?
It was. And I got one of the defective copies. So my mom, being very, very nice, went back to EB, and they said, well, we think all of our shipment is defective, but they got another one, and it worked.
I don't remember that. So they had a whole shipment that was defective?
There was a lot of... and I still check for them every once in a while. Most have been disposed, I think, by collectors and players at this time.
They've been thrown out.
But there was a run of defective copies. So she got it for me, and I sat there. See, I was actually, to take it back a little bit further, I was so excited for the Dreamcast. I don't know if you remember this. Did you have Hollywood Videos?
Yes, that was a chain. That chain was still around until about 6-7 years ago.
I actually rented the Dreamcast from Hollywood Video the month before it came out.
With the rental case?
When they did the promotion. And, tried to play through as much as Sonic's storyline without a memory card, just pausing and turning off the TV for the 2 days that I had it. So anyways, I get the Dreamcast, and I am just high as a kite on Vicodin because I've just had my teeth pulled. And I spent the entire weekend beating the game. I beat Sonic Adventure 100% in one weekend, just in this doped out haze, and I loved it. And I would go into the stores every week on Wednesdays, back when games were released on Wednesdays, and I was picking up Dreamcast titles almost every week. The thing is a lot of people remember the Dreamcast as a flash in the pan, and it was, but of its 200 and I think it's 52 game library, that's off the top of my head, so many of those games were worth playing. Even the mediocre ones were above average.
They had decent third-party support.
Yeah.
You had the major... Well, the reason I call it the last retro game system, it's the last arcade system. It's the last system where the games were featured in the arcade. So,
and
like Marvel vs. Capcom,
sure.
Soul Calibur, Crazy Taxi, which were literally just like a Dreamcast system in the arcade.
I remember people arguing you on that the one time we said that, but I think what people need to realize is when Pat and I say that, we mean direct ports directly from the arcade, hot and fresh, to the system. We're not talking about a port of a console port.
No.
Yes, you can get Crazy Taxi on a PS2, I understand, but like
we're talking they were featured.
Boom. Yeah.
We're talking that when games were on the NES, they took a year or two to come over. Like Cabal would take a year or two over to come to the NES. This was the last time where it was directly arcade to the system, right there, hot and ready, like you said.
Yeah, hot and ready.
Hot and ready.
Hot and ready. But one of my favorite memories of that was I'm not a fan of really watching football. I did for a period of time, but I do like football video games. I like the strategy of them. And I was in love with the NFL 2K series.
Heralded series. Still fondly remembered.
I played 2K5 up until 2009.
And gave EA a run for its money. Yeah. Very back and forth.
That's why EA bought the rights. They couldn't handle the pressure from
the NFL. They bought the exclusive rights because 2K was,
kicking ass. I remember sitting in the upstairs of my parents' house, and my friend Mike and I were playing NFL 2K1. And it was like May or something like that. My dad walks upstairs, walks by the TV, and just gives it a puzzled look because like we had the controllers down or whatever, and it was like just panning around the field with scoreboards. And he walks back out and he looks at the TV again, And he looks at my friend and I and goes, "What the fuck is football doing on in May?" And I'm like, woo, we finally reached that point. We've reached that point where, like, a quick glance can fool you, you know.
So fall 99, that's what it took.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah, again, when I don't think people, I'm an old man now, but when you're at the point where you're used to playing through the NES era, where the arcade games are so much better than the NES still, Super Nintendo era, they're still better to a good degree. Genesis, they're better. Now you get to the point where the arcade game was the console. It was. We're not talking close port. We're talking port. We're talking when you get the Soul Calibur disc and put it in. That's the arcade game.
That's because Soul Calibur ran on Naomi, which was an arcade Dreamcast. But
that's amazing to think about.
Yeah.
When you first see that, people were really excited about the Dreamcast because of that.
Right. And the thing of it is they weren't just the same. They were better. They added more options to them. You know, you could sit there and play them. And I don't want to spin off into another topic completely, but things like the Dreamcast and the PlayStation that more or less or completely replicated the arcade experience is largely what killed arcades. You no longer had to go to the arcade to get the real deal.
Arcades were dying anyway by the late 90s.
Yeah,
they were dying anyway, but this was it, though. This is when the consoles finally caught up.
Yep.
It took 20 years for consoles to catch up to the arcade experience. Because even on Killer Instinct in the arcade was not even close on the 64. It was in the area, but it wasn't. It wasn't exactly the same.
Nope.
The cart could not hold the information of that. They had put like a whole freaking drive in the arcade to hold all the information.
Yeah.
So I mean, the legacy of the Dreamcast, it was around for like 2 years before they stopped production. Was it even 2 years?
Well, in the U.S., I mean, there were officially released games for quite some time in Japan, but I mean,
here it was 2 years.
U.S., I think we got 2 solid years. That's it. We got NFL 2K, 2K1, and 2K2. So that means sometime in 2 years, late 2001, they axed it.
Yeah, and so you had the good sports titles. Virtua Tennis is amazing.
Oh, I would.
No one brings up Virtua Tennis as could be one of the best tennis games ever.
Well, I really like. It's a cheap game now. If anyone likes tennis games, go buy Sega All Stars Tennis. It'll cost you like $3.
I don't think I played that.
It runs on a modified Virtua Tennis engine, but with Sega characters.
Huh.
And it's a shitload of fun.
It's on the system?
No, it's not on Dreamcast. It's on you can get it on 360, PS3.
How about I believe Shenmue was a launch title, or close to it.
Fuck, was it? It was very, very close to it.
You remember the hype around Shenmue? Because I do.
I do. I remember reading through magazines before the game came out, and like the pictures of like the hand opening the drawer and like picking up a cassette tape, and they would focus on the cassette tape, and like the subtitles would be like, compare this to a cassette tape in your house back when houses had cassette tapes, and you're like, oh my god.
Shenmue wasn't a launch title.
Yeah,
but the cool thing about Shenmue was that it was sort of heralded as this open world game. Even though it wasn't truly open world, it was more expansive than what we had on consoles before.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to walk around town, talk to all the NPCs, do these mini games, and off, you know what I mean? Go off on your own for at least a little bit, even though you had to go back to the main story. That wasn't really heard of before on a console.
No,
it really wasn't. I'm trying to think of the N64, something like that, and I can't think of anything that really had that. I can't really think of anything.
64.
PlayStation at the point that they really didn't have anything like that either.
Grand Theft Auto 1, but I mean that was more of an arcade game, and then
that was overhead.
Yeah, N64 you had like Body Harvest, but I don't even think that was out yet. I mean, Shenmue was, and that's different too. Shenmue really was kind of the first foray. I can't get it out of my
foray
mind.
Into the open world.
At least on consoles.
And it was heralded as sort of like a killer app for the Dreamcast, and it was.
Well, Soul Calibur was too.
Soul Calibur was as well.
I think Soul Calibur was actually the killer app. That was the game that actually got, I think, more people to buy it than anything.
Here are the launch titles: Arrow Wings, Air Force Delta, Blue Stinger. That was a shooting game.
It was like a Resident Evil ripoff.
Cart, Flag to Flag. Don't remember that one. Expendable, House of the Dead 2.
Yeah.
We always forget that those are on the Dreamcast, and those are exactly the arcade. Hydro Thunder.
That was a great version of it, too.
Monaco Grand Prix. Mortal Kombat Gold, which is a pretty good version. It isn't?
No,
I thought it was.
Buggy as fuck.
Oh, I don't know then. I thought because it had all the characters in it. NFL 2K, NFL Blitz 2000.
You were thinking Trilogy.
That's probably what it was. Pen.
Tri-Icelon? I love Pen. Okay, so here's Pen Tri-Icelon, right? People hate this game, but it's fantastic. You are penguins or walruses or other creatures. It is a racing game, okay? And the triathlon is belly gliding, swimming, and I think just basic waddling, if I'm not mistaken. And each course has 3 of these sections. And it was like their attempt at like a little like crazy Mario Kart like racing game. Was Choo Choo Rocket a launch title, or was that shortly after?
It's not on here.
Shortly after that. That was a great one.
Of course, the very impressive Power Stone.
Oh yeah.
That was again another one in the arcade that you could play in the arcade, and it was like, wow, you can run around a room and fight, and that was just and pick up things and throw them, and that was unheard of at the time.
I always liked Power Stone 1 better than 2. 2 added 4 players though.
Ready to Rumble Boxing, Sonic Adventure, Soul Calibur, which again that was amazing to see when it came out. TNN Motorsports Hardcore Heat.
Moved a lot of units.
Tokyo Extreme Racer and Trick Style.
Tokyo Extreme Racer really should get some credit for being unique, but I'm not going to go off on my love affair with that game.
That's an impressive launch list though. That's about 20 plus games, that a little bit for everyone in there.
One of the biggest and one of the better launches in console
because
history,
it came out a year before in Japan.
Yeah.
And Sega, we know Sega really dropped the ball in the mid 90s.
They dropped the ball constantly.
Really.
They can't market.
And plus, I mean, they should have came out. If they came out with this a year before, I mean, people forget that this was only what 6 months before the PS2 came out. PS2 came out in spring of 2000.
No, it was fall. Well, spring of 2000 Japan, because I ended up getting one like that. I thought it was. I'm pretty sure it was fall, October of 01.
You're right. Okay, it was October. Okay, so they had a year head start. Imagine if they had 2 years head start.
Things would have been a lot different.
They would have been more integrated. They would have probably got a better head. Not that no one bought, but the Dreamcast sold a lot.
And I'm just using secondhand info here, but I've heard that the graphic capabilities of the Dreamcast, if it were allowed to have matured to its full potential, would have been very similar to PS2.
So again, it's sort of the same thing Atari did. They put out consoles too late when they shouldn't have. I mean, we always talk about the Saturn. The Saturn should have been earlier instead of the Sega CD. And they should have skipped the Saturn if it came to that point and just pushed the Dreamcast.
Right. Yeah.
Because the Saturn was a colossal failure in the U.S. But the Dreamcast did okay, but it was too little, too late for Sega in hardware, and that's why I said, screw this, we can't survive with hardware. We'll just become a software company. But no, I love the Dreamcast. I don't love the controller that much. I think the controller's okay. Some people love the controller. I think it's okay. The VMU was revolutionary at the time too.
I like the controller for pretty much everything except for what the Dreamcast is really known for these days, which is fighting games. Mm-hmm. That D-pad sits way too high, and I find pulling off any sort of moves with the D-pad on that to be miserable. Luckily, it also had an amazing arcade stick, the green one, that had the little hole for the VMU. I don't know if you've ever seen the
I don't know if I've seen that.
You've never seen the Dreamcast arcade stick?
Do I have one? I don't know. I have to
Fuck off.
I don't know.
Really?
I don't play the Dreamcast that often.
You're a wiener.
But obviously people still make games for the Dreamcast. Every year there's still releases. Homebrews.
NG Dev Project usually does all of their shooters as Neo Geo titles, Neo CD titles, and Dreamcast titles.
So in terms of new games being released and quality new games,
yeah, I mean these are homebrew, but they're impressive. But they're like commercial quality.
I mean, I'm not talking trash about the NES homebrews, but most are not commercial quality of what you would have saw in the system back then.
As long as you like shooters, you can still get them on the Dreamcast, and they're nice.
So there you have it. Dreamcast, happy birthday. You're still loved a lot in terms of we talk about the TurboGrafx, how people have a cult following. This is beyond a cult following for the Dreamcast. This is like people adore
system. It. I've had, and especially, I don't think it has anything to do with the birthday. I think it's just how I always talk about. There's a weird video game hive mind, and people just get collective itches for things. But the past 3-4 weeks, I've had a lot of requests for Dreamcasts, and we've been sold out of them at both stores. But man, people almost more than not more than NES, but with more passion. When they see a Dreamcast and they're a Dreamcast fan, they just lose their shit. And when I start talking to them about it, they just want to talk about the Dreamcast and all the games they played. They love it. They have such fond memories of that system.
Let's talk about the fact that people think that piracy was the death knell of the Dreamcast. It wasn't. Because guess what would have happened?
It didn't help.
It didn't help, but if I knew I can get a console and burn all the games, I'll go out and buy that console. How is that hurting Sega? That might hurt Sega's first-party sales.
Sega's not getting any royalties.
But still, you'd be selling consoles still. And that was their problem. They weren't selling enough consoles.
Well, yeah, I think it's a combination of both. Sega,
here's the thing. Back in 2000, CD burners were not cheap. They were not cheap until probably 2001, 2002. So while you still can get one for a few $100s, I don't see, at least I don't personally see a lot of people doing that. I just don't.
I do. And I know when I had a Dreamcast and it was current, I knew people who had stacks. And if you didn't have a CD burner, there were, I'm not even kidding, hair salons downtown, record shops downtown that would keep binders of burned PlayStation and Dreamcast games. I've
seen more PlayStation burn discs than I have Dreamcast. That's just me. I've seen a lot more.
I've seen in public for sale, like hidden behind counters, I've seen more PlayStation. But if I go over to someone's house and they have a Dreamcast, what do I usually see? Just a stack.
Then or now?
Now and then.
I'll say now you can, because you can just download all the ISOs yourself, and who wouldn't?
Maybe it was just the people I was hanging out with were particularly
I was gonna say, you might be more the tech savvy
Yeah.
crowd. I'm not saying people weren't doing it, but to blame that the reason that the Dreamcast failed, no. Sega didn't market it well. They didn't market it from the get-go. If you look at the Sega commercials today, it's like, what the hell is this? It's like anything else. If you don't market yourself as a cool system and try to be, and that was all Sega's edgy 90s commercials were crap. After the first few years, like, why do we care about this? Yeah, you're edgy. Who cares? Sell the games. Sell the system.
Right.
They failed to do that. So, but we still love you, Sega. We still love the Dreamcast.